Peace. Peace, everyone. Let me get my screen on. Okay. How's everyone doing? Peace, Sister Marjorie. Marjorie Marie Art. Peace, Sister Yamina. Let me just do a couple more things here. Okay, yeah. So today we're gonna be dealing with value, right? Another session dealing with value. And I don't know, I'm excited for this segment because I'm not sure how it's gonna go. As it is with any type of sketching session, right? You just go in with the intentions and with the notes you took and try to apply them. So this strong, I took a few notes on mainly plane changes, really identifying planes and different types of shadows. So my focus was being able to separate light from shadow, which was partially influenced because I decided to do it, and then we had our midday affirmative, the Anu community, and Chief was building on light, right, and the difference between and the idea of light being good and what does it mean for something to be good, and when you look at Bereshit or Genesis in the Bible, you would have in the beginning. And in the beginning, the Elohim, they separated the light from the dark, right? Which I thought was super interesting because that's the first thing that you want to do in any type of artistic piece when you're showing any type of value. The first thing you want to do when you're dealing with value is separate light from dark, right? And light is information, light is knowledge. So the more light you have, the more information you have about the shape of a thing, its form, whether it's what color it is. Like light is how we perceive the environment. It's the only means we have to perceive the environment um, in a visual sense, right? Without light, we can't see anything. We can feel stuff and kind of guess its shape, but we really need that light to inform what's going on. So what I have going on here, what I was doing before I hit the live button. Maybe I was getting a little too carried away because hit the live button late. But what I was doing was just going over the idea of starting with two tones. So I just had a random apple and I was just drawing out two tones. I had been taking notes on some videos made by, I think his name is Marco Bucci, Bucci, and he was going over different types of shadows, and I really liked the way he broke down the information. So I figured, why not practice it on the live? So that's what we're gonna be going over. So a couple of things that I wanted to do. And by the way, let me know if you can hear me, if the sound is okay, the music is too loud or too soft. Peace after Naya. He's the fire starter. Yeah. So if you guys want to join in, I would definitely say this is going to be a fun one. You're going to learn a lot. It's a couple of technical terms I'm going to be using, but a big part of applying them is having a very thorough way of not just understanding them, but also being able to explain them without, losing anybody. So willfully, willfully, I do okay. So the first thing we want to deal with, and I'm going to apply that in a second, is we want to deal with identifying planes. right? That's super important. Um, there's this concept that I just learned about as I was studying this, so I won't get into it too much. This strong, but maybe not strong. The Asario head, which was apparently created by an artist by the name of, is it John or James? His last name was Asario. And he created this geometric head, this geometric sculpture of a head, and it shows you all of the different plane changes that you may go through when you're drawing a head. And I thought it was real interesting, and it could be really helpful. So I'm gonna go with one of my funky neon colors, and I'm just gonna try to identify some of the planes on this apple that I just drew. Um, so one of the things that we may need to go over, make this smaller. One of the things I want to go over and identify when it comes to planes is you want to look at them as um, changes in direction, right? Of course, we know that we have forms, and forms are three-dimensional shapes. And with these three-dimensional shapes, we have the capacity for something to change direction, right? So what we want to do is identify not only changes in direction, but changes in direction in relation to our light source. Our light source, of course, coming from this area up here, right? So that would be our light source beaming down. And I'm just gonna keep drawing these forms. I just want to draw some simple planes. I don't want to take up too much time with this. So I'm just gonna speed it up here. Okay, so now I've just divided this thing up into some very crude and rough planes, right? And what this will help me to do is just separate. Let me make sure I do this on another plane. I did not want to do that. Okay, so I'm going to gray this out and do a light gray. Oh no. What have I done? Oh, you know what I could do? Nope, can't do that. How can I do this? I was gonna gray it out, but I'll do it step by step. How about that? So I'll add gray into each one of these. Aha, I know what to do. It's part of the process. Got to get creative. Okay, yeah, that'll work. So I'm just gonna cover this with a completely neutral color, right? But you can still see the planes, sort of. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna separate the ones that are facing towards the light and the ones that are facing away from the light. And first thing we want to do is establish the highlight. So what's the highlight? The highlight is, I think I've explained this at one point or another for those of you just coming in. Okay, let's say this is the ground and this is the sun. Okay, so this is the sun, right? And it's cool sunglasses. And he is shining light. A light travels in a straight line, right? No matter where it goes, it travels in a straight line. And what happens when it hits a surface is it bounces off. It bounces off the surface, right? It doesn't get completely absorbed. Sometimes it is, but for the most part, it reflects off, right? It becomes weaker once it bounces off. So this part of the light is much weaker than this part of the light. So you call this, I'll put a D here, call this direct light. And you would call any light that isn't coming from a direct source ambient light. But I'll write it over here because that's important. Yeah. So you can read it a little bit. So you call this ambient light. So what happens when direct light bounces off of a surface and it hits you in the eye? You get a highlight. So whereas this is a very grayed out sort of white, is white with a gray tint. Highlight is completely white. So let's make this one the highlight. Right. Let's say the light bounces off of this area or this plane and it hits you directly in the eye. Now we also have, I just have the gray there as a middle tone. We also have what's known as, I think I've covered this before too. We have what's known as the terminator, right? Some people call it the core shadow. Some people call it the bed bug line. I don't know why they call it that. I call it the terminator because A, it sounds cool, and B, it's kind of appropriate. It's the word that's used for the line that separates the light and dark side of a planet or the moon. So you may have lighter shadows, lighter shades on this side where the light is hitting it, and then you may have a very dark side over here, which is where no light is hitting it. The terminator terminates. It's basically the line that separates the light from the dark, or it terminates where light is directly hitting a surface. So everything else is either shadow or reflected light, which we'll get into that as well. But for now, I just want to focus on separating the light from the dark. So I'll use a slightly less dark gray. And let's say we separate it like so. All right. This one I can make a little bit more opaque. Oh, the whole one's going okay. Okay. Let's say that's your terminator there or your core shadow, right? So everything on this side would be much lighter than on the other side. So I don't necessarily need to make this any darker. I just need to add my shadows in. So let's do this instead. Yeah, I'll make this darker. Make this slightly lighter. And voila. So here we have three types of lines or three types of shadows already, right? You have we have this one, which is the form shadow. Whoa. Oh no, what did I do? Okay. So we have this one over here, which is the core shadow. This is the core shadow. Make this funky orange. This would be a core shadow. This would be, I'm sorry, your form shadow. You put FS here. This is your form shadow. This is your form light, or you can say average shadow and average light. And then this would be terminator. Okay. Form light, form shadow, terminator. And then you have your highlight. After that, because um, because of our example earlier, right, with ambient light, that's a crooked underline. Because of what we talked about earlier with ambient light, now we have light that's bouncing all over the place, right? So let's say we have our sun, and let's say the light bounces here, and then it bounces here, and then it bounces up here, right? Each time it's a little lighter. So even if I used okay, let's try this again. Hopefully I wasn't gone for too long. Okay, so we have this much lighter shadow here. And I know it may be difficult to see, so turn up the opacity and you can see it a little bit more. So these are areas of reflected shadow. And Actually, I want a little less. Let me keep this there. Yeah, let me put a little less there. So this is reflected there. I'll make this a little less opaque. Make this a little larger. Okay. So I'm going to up the opacity so you can see a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so we have our reflected shadow. And what I want to do now is we have all of these different planes, right? And not all of them are the same. They're not getting light at the same rate, right? Oh, I almost forgot. We got some more shadows up here. Okay. So obviously everything isn't facing the light. We gotta make a note of that. So what I'm going to do now is, let's say, make a couple of lines to indicate what's facing where. So we have, I get used to these brush changes. I'm still used to using a pen or a pencil and just directly going by pressure. Okay, so this plane is facing upward. This plane is facing towards the light. Well, not so much so. This is more like here. This one is facing towards the light. This one is facing a little bit away. These are facing away as well. These are facing more towards us. These are facing obviously away as well. And as are these, right? So we have all of these different plane changes and we want to organize them in a way that makes sense. So we're going to go based on the degree to which they face our direct source of light. So obviously this one is going to be brighter than everything else, right? Except for the highlight. So it's going to be as close to white as possible without actually being white. So I'll start with this as a base color. And I'm going to lighten it as close to white, but not exactly white. And that's going to be these planes here. Then I'm going to darken it a little. Just to show that it's getting close to that transition. and it's not exactly facing the light directly anymore. Okay. So let me up the opacity here so you can see what I just did. Okay. Let me make sure this is also a little darker since it's facing away from the light a little bit more. Okay, do you see the difference? So what I just did there was I applied, I should be able to find it here, right? Keep going for this eyedropper. What I just applied are called halftones. Where can I put it? I'll put it right here. Halftones. And halftones are the points in between the shades and shadows in between, well, the tones and shades between light and dark. And I use the words tones and shades purposefully. Um, tones are like your halftones, and then you have tints, which are like closer to white, and then you have shades, which are, of course, closer to shadows. All right. So those are your halftones. And of course, I explained how ambient light and how that can affect your reflected light. The last thing I wanted to talk about is ambient. I want to spell the word ambient occlusion. Right? Ambient occlusion, to occlude or to occult is just to hide. So it's something that's hidden or is invisible. And what happens when ambient light bounces off of surfaces is there are certain areas on a surface around an object where ambient light can get to it, and there are other areas where it can't get to it, right? So ambient light affects the edges where things can get to. Ambient occlusion affects the things that light cannot get to, or rather, it represents the area that's unaffected by the ambient light. So let's see if I can reduce the strength of this eraser. So ambient occlusion would affect this area here. Oh wow, that's strong. Let me see if I can make this weaker. Yeah, that's better. So it would affect all but the creases up in the corner there, right? It's still a level of darkness, of course, but it's not affecting everything the same. It's still a shadow, but it's not affecting everything the same way. So let me add the shadow bar. Right. So there we have our ambient occlusion. Of course, we have these halftones even in the shaded section, right? So let me decrease the opacity here and just add a little bit more for the shadow side. And then we'll go into trying to apply this on people. So let's see, what was our darkest color here? I might have to make that darker. Too big. And of course, you can always blur the edges between your halftones. And that makes everything look a little bit more realistic. And voila, you got an apple. Right? And well, let me check the chat. I don't know what's going on. Oh, peace. Peace is the self and eats. Peace is the alpha. Greetings. Welcome to the space. Is this making sense to everyone so far? I'm talking out loud because it's workshop hours. I gotta say it out loud so it could stick in my mind. But willfully explaining it is helping you as much as it's helping me. But I'm going to basically remove that and that. And let's see if I can add, what do I want to start with? I have a couple of reference photos that I wanted to go through just to explore some of these. I'll start with this one because I think this image basically outlines everything I just described. So I'm going to use this layer here. And this orange. And I'll use you. So to recap, we were talking about planes of the face, talking to myself. What have I done? Okay. Talking about plans. Also talking about, but you have form light. Sometimes people call it average light. Ooh, thought I was going to run on the run. And you have form shadow, sometimes called average shadow. Then after that, we have halftones. After that, we have ambient light, and last but not least, ambient occlusion, right? Whew, that's a lot. But all of them are important. I realized that I had been neglecting a lot of these different aspects. So I'm gonna use these letters as sort of acronyms to identify different parts of the face. Oh, I did forget something. This is actually, it's probably supposed to be number one, but it's gonna be in eighth place. Move that over there. Direct light, and right behind that. And last term, I swear. All right, Terminator. And that would be it, right? These are different aspects of value that I think are super important. Let me make this piece a little bit more visible here. Okay, that's better. Okay, so each of these different aspects of light and shadow are super important and they all have their different role. Of course, you have different plane changes. Made this a little smaller. You have different plane changes. So let's take her forehead, right? You can see the outline, of course, of her hairline, but this can also help you to identify different planes, right? This is a plane. This is a plane. This plane goes up a little back. This is a plane. 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 Actually, I shouldn't have done that on that layer. All right, so let's go over the planes of her face briefly. And I'm basically drawing based on whenever I see the geometry of her face take a sharp enough direction. Okay, so I just roughly divided her face into planes, right? And with all of those planes, I can tell, of course, the areas here are facing towards the light, which is sort of coming through almost like an open door sort of area. But it's hitting her face here, and it's almost coming from a horizontal direction too. Right. So I'm gonna move this for a second. Those are the planes of a face, right? So we get the planes. Check. Form and average light. We know that the form slash average light is in this area here. We can clearly see that. Anywhere where the light directly hits her face, we know that that space is going to be pretty much white, right? For the method that I'm using, because we're going with the two-tone method, right? And when it comes to the light, you already know that's the light. When it comes to your um, and that can also be related to your direct light as well. I think that's probably why I didn't add it, but I'll add it there because direct light is an important term, and I want to highlight that because it lets you know this is direct light, this is reflected light. But we'll get to reflected light. The average shadow is, of course, well, let me use a different. Probably shouldn't be drawn on her face like that, like this. Yeah, let me use something else. Okay, so I'll use green for light. This would be your light sides. Right. And I will use red for your dark sides. So all of this would be considered our dark side, right? Well, I'll use something different for that. That's something a little different. These are shadow sides as well. Dark sides, dark sides. So we have our average shadow, half tones, which are, I'll say blue. Your half tones are in between. Half tones blend the dark and the light together, just like they did with the apple. Then we have our ambient light. And ambient light, again, is just light that's just in the room. It's not specifically shown on anyone, it's just there, right? Let's use purple for ambient light. Ambient light is kind of tricky because your ambient light could be your half tones, right? It's just not direct light, that's all. And it can also be easily confused with reflected light. So I'll use yellow for reflected light, which would be here, here, and here, and even here, here, in this area here. All of that is reflected light. Ambient occlusion is, I kind of call it occlusion shadows too. I'll use the dark blue, but this would be your ambient occlusion here because your ambient light doesn't affect it as much, right? Then we already talked about direct light. Your highlight would of course be here. Um, I'll use something different for highlights. Run out of colors. This would be your highlight, 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 highlight. and of course your terminator. I'm gonna use something easy to see. This would be a terminator. This whole line, right? So all of that is going on, and we want to make it so harmonious that we don't see all of that. We just see her face, which is the cool part about value because it helps to give so much form and structure to what it is that we're looking at, right? So all of this seems as smooth as this, and you don't even realize it, because there's so many tiny plane changes that's going on in the face. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to use this two-tone method that I've been looking at and taking notes on. Okay, so I'm just checking the chat. Anu Radio says it is. Okay, cool. It's making sense. And yes, great live, Sister Yafe. I had to cut out early. So what I am going to do is make a very brief. I'll make a very brief, small outline, just a sketchy outline, and I'll put it on another layer. Let's see. Uh-oh. Okay, there we go. I think my device messed up. So go back to our Loomis method. It's not the Loomis method. There we go. I'll make simple circle here. And you can see that she's turning facing that way. So I am going to cut this in half. Face is tilted slightly downwards, like so. This would be her chin. And say the chin is like here. This would be the center of her face. The side plane of her face. And got a hairline right here. Okay, cool. So I'll use that as a very loose outline. Of course, she has hair and stuff like that, but we'll get to that. Made this a little big, less opaque. And I'll go in with my whites. So I can tell that the whites are very clear around this part here. Let me do this before I start. Okay, so the whites are coming around here. And I'm just drawing like shapes. This would be the bottom of her nose, which is very close to where the top of her lips start. Make that smaller. And make this a little less. Okay. Mess with the shapes a little bit more. This would be eyebrows. Eye sockets. We have the nose. Mouth. And all I'm doing is separating light from dark. So I'm really just using two tones, white and black, or white and dark gray. And you have this shape down here. Shape here. Drawing lights and shadows and drawing values as shapes is very helpful as well. You know, it takes a lot of refining and it's a little bit more forgiving when you're dealing with digital painting than it is when you're actually using pen and pencil and paper. Oops. It's a little bit more here. And that's about it in terms of light. Not a lot of light in this image. There is some light in the hair though. I could tone this down a little bit now. Okay, so now I'm moving on to the shadows. I'm gonna make the shadows a little bit darker. It could be darker. And I'm just gonna use this to shape over here the outline. Make this a little smaller, make this a little more. I made her nose too high. This should be where the nose is right here. which is the other cool part about using digital art. You don't have to do a whole lot of erasing. Okay, so pretty much separated light from the dark. And in the beginning stages, it's like, what's going on? you know, doesn't look like it at all. But you got to make um, lots of adjustments, lots of reshaping, and eventually it starts to resemble what it is you're looking to create. So now that the darks and lights are a little bit more mapped out, we can start to add our highlights. Not highlights, I'm sorry, our midtones. And the midtones, again, they help to blend the light and the shadow together in a way that makes sense. Because right now, all you see is just light and shadow. And at the moment, it's hard to determine what is what. it's kind of a mid-tone. Yeah, leave those alone. Okay, so we have our light and our shadow. Now we're gonna move into halftones, right? Is that the next thing on our thing? I think it is. So we went through making sure we have planes. The planes would be the light and the dark. That's how I know where the white would go because of what's facing the light. So we have our average light and our average shadows mapped out. Now it's time for halftones. And in order to do that, um, I should have probably made a value scale, but it's fine. I will. Well, I guess I could use this. How about that? Not you. You. Okay. So what I'm gonna do here is just demonstrate how you can. I'm not cheating, but we're looking at how each of these tones are gonna sit inside of this whole situation here. So we can see that the whites on the left, midtones, um, aren't going to be in the middle like they typically are because we have this very long occlusion. I mean, this very long terminator that's actually shaping itself along the nose. I don't know if you all can see that. But typically, when you have any type of shape, I mean, any type of shadow being cast, or any type of light for that matter, it's good to note that light follows the form, shadow follows the form. It's not just a straight line, it's actually curving along with her nose. Okay, so it's forming that sort of thing. Even with the lips, same thing. So shadows actually take the shape of the object that they're being cast on. That is super important, and it helps you to actually form shadows based on your knowledge of anatomy, because you know that when something is flat or something is round, the shadow is going to follow suit. So the shadow lets you know the shape of whatever it's being cast on top of. I thought that was important to mention. But I'm going to move this because I want to cheat. I'm going to put that right back there. Excuse me. I'm going to put that right back there and hide it. Or I'll show it. I can show it. I'll use it as a guide. Okay, so next step up, we have this dark shadow here. And what I was supposed to have before our halftones is actually the terminator, but I forgot it in my list. So I'm going to choose a darker, not black, darker shadow. And I'm not going to make it super deep. Yeah, that'll work. I'm just going to make this shape. I actually can't see with this thing here. I'm going to follow along and make this shape along her nose. And this is actually going to give shape to her nose because I have her nose in the darker side of things. And I can always come back and adjust it a little bit more later. Okay, so now what I'm doing is it's a little bit of, no, I'll leave that for half tones. And I think I'll move on from there. I'll move on to the half tones. So for my half tones, I'm going to use something that is very close between lights and darks, just a little lighter, like so. And I'll use that to make this a little less flowy. I use that to connect everything based on the planes of her face. And of course, there's not just one half tone, but I'm going to layer it up. So a little brighter and brighter still. Whoops. Okay, I think we're getting close enough. And it's mainly just not trying to get accurate, but trying to get a good idea of how to spread around those values. And I'm seeing where I'm making some some simple mistakes where some values are a little too dark and some aren't. Um, the shapes aren't lining up. So I'm getting the hang of shaping these values a little bit more instead of just going all willy nilly with the lights. Okay, so this area here needs to lighten up. Um, this area here needs some more reflected lights. Up here, the shape of the reflected light should be more like that. So the shape of the shadow should be more like that as well. Um, Need some more shadow under here. And the lips, I just gave up on the lips. I didn't even try to shape them. I was just trying to get the lights in the right spots. Right here is too bright, and the shape of this area is off. The nose is pretty all right, even though it should be a little bit more over here. The chin, this shape needs to change. And I'm going through these because I don't have time to fix all of these mistakes, but this is what I'm seeing so far, right? And yeah, I even with the shape of the face, I think she starts looking more in this direction when she should. Her eyes are looking that way, but her face should be tilted a little bit more downwards, like so. So these are some of the issues that I'm seeing with it, and I'm gonna wrap it up for tonight. But I think I did. I think I managed to try out each of those different shadows, right? Let's go back and review. How do I move this? Right there. Okay, so the planes, of course, I could always stand to accentuate the planes a little bit more. I think because I didn't take the time to actually point out where each plane is, that um, everything didn't line up properly in terms of the tilt of the face, the shape of the shadows, and the shapes of the lights. So that's something I'll watch out for next time. Um, Half tones. I think the half tones could be a little less prevalent. I think they only need to be present where everything is changing. Like where the lights and the darks are blending into each other. So I'll make a note of that. I think I have way too many half tones. Ambient light. I think I could use some work with working on the ambient light and the reflective light and even the ambient occlusion because I just have this very dark occlusion shadow under her chin. Nothing much else in terms of it fading away. But that's because there isn't that much direct light, so there's not much I could do there. The Terminator could use some work, but I think that goes back to light and shadow shapes, and the same goes for the highlights. But I think overall, I wouldn't say it's the most beautiful picture in the world, but I think functionally it's helping me to explore how to utilize these different tools more effectively and more consciously. Other than that, though, I really appreciate you guys coming through and sticking with me. More to come for the next strong. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm going to be practicing and working on this. And next strong, I'll be getting into that Asaro head and seeing what that's all about. Um, it's supposed to be helping with. It's supposed to help with determining and identifying different planes on the face. So I'm excited to looking at that and seeing what I can learn. But other than that, give thanks to everyone for coming through, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your strong. All right, peace, everyone. Be well.